gentlemen, get ready, cause here we go. Straight out of Phoenix, this is Backpack Radio. Backpack Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Backpack Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. This is Backpack Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Backpack Radio. Get ready, cause here we go. This is Backpack Radio. With your host, Vocab Malone.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? That's right, I am your host, Vocab Malone. How y'all doing today? This is Backpack Radio Live. You'll find out why it's got a name Backpack in there later on. But it's not just because of the character of the backpack. It's also because we give you urban apologetics for those on the go. Anyways, what's up today? We're doing a very interesting, touching, sensitive, provocative, controversial topic. Talking about imprecatory psalms, focusing on Psalm 137, dashing the babies against, say what now? And the date is October 23rd. It is a Tuesday, and I am very glad to join y'all. I see you in the chat already. Hey, go ahead on, y'all. Grab this link and share it. And then if you could, please smash that like button. And here's how this show came about. Let me just tell you real quick here. Here's how this show came about. You guys remember recently I interviewed an ex-Hebrew Israelite? Remember that? I think the interview went pretty well. Remember that? Peppermint mocha latte. I made it myself. Yeah, so what happened with that interview is he went from Hebrew Israelism, specifically he was in the ICGJC, and then what had happened, y'all, he became an atheist. And, I was upfront about that. I wasn't just saying he was an ex-Hebrew Israelite. And so the first part of the interview, we talked about him being a Hebrew Israelite, and then the second part of the interview, we talked about him being an atheist. And in that discussion, he brought up a problem he had with the Bible. His name was Miguel, by the way. Him and I are cool. We've been messaging back and forth since the interview and stuff like that. What's up, Mike W? What's up, Andrew Graham? What's up, Elizabeth? What's up, Lily R? What's up, D New? Keep on changing your name. What's up, Built for Speed, Batman? What up, Miss Piggy? What's up, Roxby in the house? What's up, Michelle Marie? Julian West, good to see you. Got a couple other people. I don't want to forget anybody, but I'm bound to do it. I want to make sure I said you too, Michelle Marie. Anyways, what's up with it is this. Miguel brought up Psalm 137, which includes a very shocking line. And you know what? Let's just get right into this. And I'm going to actually play the Bible verse from the King James Version. I got a little video set up that I borrowed from another website where they read it, so you guys will be able to hear it. But while I'm doing that, again, take this link, share it, smash the like button. Also, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification buttons, please. We're trying to get to 8,000 before the end of the year. You can help make that happen. And if you see the little logo down there in the bottom of the screen that says ETS, that is simply because part of what I'm trying to do until November 13th, because that's actually when ETS begins, the annual society meeting there, trying to raise a couple dollars to get me there. So the two ways you can do that are become a Patreon supporter. Actually, I got PayPal and the Cash App too, but whatever. Or I got a GoFundMe set up. Somebody, if they could drop that in the chat, but if not, just relax. So anyways, hey, what's up, Nathan? I see you. Hey, what's up, Emmanuel? I see you. Hey, Brian Weinberg. Awesome. Good to see you. Uh-oh, Garcia. Using the Greek in the name. Right on, but it's good to see everybody. So let me go ahead and play this. And I think that's an important thing to do, is to let you guys hear this from the jump. So here's Psalm 137. It's only 9 verses being read in its entirety from the King James Version of the Bible. And this is what
Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof, for there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom and the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones.
God's Word, Psalm 137. That's the KJV. I'm going to read it now in the ESV and do some running commentary. This is just the introduction still, everybody. I'm getting everybody up to speed here. Rocks B, it's not mint like green mint. It's peppermint. It's like, that's a common thing. You know, you put peppermint with mocha. So it's not like green mint, although people do that in ice cream. So the flavor I got is peppermint mocha that I made. All right, Psalm 137. Here we go. By the waters of Babylon. So that tells us the setting of the psalm. That means the person writing this is not David. It's not Solomon. It's not Moses. Those are some of the other authors. It's not Asaph. It's an exile. They're exiled outside of Israel, there in the land of Babylon. And that's actually a famous song. You can actually Google, it's been sung by a whole lot of people by that title, and it comes from that. By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept. So this psalm has elements of lament. So this psalm is meant to be emotionally riveting, and it is. I'm not going to try to minimize that today at all. This is emotionally riveting. It's supposed to be shocking because the situation is shocking. There we sat down and wept, perhaps at the end of a long journey. You know what I'm saying? You see what's going on there? Then we remembered Zion, sort of almost the religious way to refer to Jerusalem and really to God's presence ultimately. On the willows there we hung our lyres, the things you would make music with, they put up. For there our captors required us of us songs. So hey, Babylonians, we just conquered you Jerusalem folks. Now sing us a song. And our tormentors, notice their tormentors, mirth, saying. So the idea is, hey, why don't you guys do some shake a little jig for us? Sing us about your God, your religion, your homeland. Sing us one of the songs of Zion, the place you just been yanked out of, right? And then the exile person asks this in response. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Now, the Lord there is the Yahweh. It's the Tetragrammaton. So how shall we sing Yahweh's song in a foreign land? Meaning detached from everything, you know, that we've been given, and here we are in this other place filled with pagan idolatry. How are we going to sing a song of our land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Now, that's an interesting line, too. Some of you guys know the Hasidic reggae artist, Matisyahu. He has a song called Jerusalem, and in it he says, Jerusalem, if I forget you, right? And he says, let my right hand forget what it's supposed to do, right? That's actually where that's part of where he's getting it from. He says, let my tongue not come down. I forget what he says exactly, but so that's the line. So this has inspired a number of songs here. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. So you can see even by that verbiage right there, this is a poetic psalm, right? You see the poetry, let my right hand forget its skill. It's poetry. Doesn't mean it's not real. I'm not going to memorize it. It's just saying understand the way that this is being written. There's an artistic expression given to this lament. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. Hebrew parallelism, just saying the same thing in a different way in essence. If I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. So love for God, love for his people, love for his place, love for everything that was part of the life there, specifically God's presence. Verse 7, remember, O Lord. Now this is key. That remember phrase is key. That's saying, God, you've promised something, and God, look what's happened. That is what's going on here. So this is recalling to mind the covenant promises made by Yahweh to his people. Remember, O Lord, and again, that's Yahweh. Whenever you see the all caps L-O-R-D in English translations, it's the Tetragrammaton. That's the 4 letters, English transliterated YHWH, Yahweh. Remember Yahweh, which is a covenant name in essence. Remember Yahweh against the Edomites the day of Jerusalem, how they said, lay it bare down to its foundations. That's saying, God, remember that our neighbors, who are actually our relatives, the Edomites are related to Israelites from a common ethnic lineage going back to Jacob and Esau. Remember, what did the Edomites do when... Now, the Edomites aren't the one who came in and destroyed Jerusalem. It was Babylon, right? But what he's saying is, remember how they encouraged. They were like cheerleaders for Babylon. Lay it bare, lay it bare. A lot of translations will say raze it to the ground. R-A-Z-E, that means destroy it by burning it down. So this is a totality of destruction that they're encouraging. How they said, lay it bare, down to its foundation, so everything gone, including the temple. You see that? You see the significance of saying that? Then what's it say? O daughter of Babylon. So this is Babylon and all those who associate with her. Those who are her ideological descendants, perhaps physical descendants, perhaps specifically the warriors and the generals in the royal house. But, O daughter of Babylon, doomed to be destroyed. So, it's saying there's going to be judgment on Babylon for what they've done to Israel. Blessed shall he be who repays you. Now, why would they be blessed for paying them? Because in essence, they're executing God's righteous judgment on Babylon. That's why he's saying they'll be blessed when they do this, with what you have done to us. So this is eye for eye, all right? Exactly what you've done to us will be done unto you. That's the prayer. And it makes sense if you think about what's going on here. This person's family, house, everything. The kids could have been killed. We know kids were killed, but we don't know the details of who lost what family, meaning I can't say this psalmist lost their children and wife, right? But I can say they witnessed babies being killed because that's what they're saying. They're saying, as it was done to us, let it be done unto you. And that's where the climb. Notice this is the last verse. That's on purpose. This is an artistic construction. This shocking, riveting, violent verse is the last verse in this short little imprecatory psalm. On purpose, and I'm going to define imprecatory in a second here, don't worry. Blessed shall he be. Now, some translations will say happy. Similar idea. Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rock. And again, that is utterly shocking, isn't it? We shouldn't act like it isn't. And so, this is one of the common verses that, for example, an atheist would love to use against the Bible, against Christianity, against Old Testament based faith, anything like that, right? Maybe you guys have heard this before. Excuse me. Let me check the live chat here. Lily R is part of the mod squad, along with Rox B, and along with Warrior Woman, and along with well, actually, there's a bunch of you that are actually part of my mod squad. But you guys are also Patreons, such as you, Michelle. I see you in there. And Lily gave in the super chat. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you guys, all y'all, for holding it down. Especially, you know, Lily, Rox, Michelle. But we got good people up in here. And hey guys, we're going to have some Hebrew Israelites and atheists come in here. Give them a little bit of leeway. Meaning, I know we've been kind of strict on them because we're trying to teach them how to act. But what I want to do is, like, if they can learn enough, then we don't have to keep on being so strict. So, one thing, when they put the verses up that they're putting, like GMS Yabasop just put one up, to us it looks like random verses. And I understand that. But here's the thing. Because of their mindset, which is sort of bizarre, and they're not the best of communicators, to them, these verses connect to what's being talked about. And so it's almost like cryptic code. It's designed for those who understand it. But they're not totally random as far as they're concerned. So I try to give them a little bit of leeway when they post what appear to be unrelated, sometimes Bible verses. So just give them a little bit of leeway. Hey, thank you, Don Newman. I see you also with the super chat. We got some great moderators, and we got great people up in here. Well, I'm gonna break this verse down, but we just got a question I've got to tackle. Okay, I'm going to take this on right now. GMS, y'all, what's up? Chop shot. Now, let me say something. This show is designed primarily to answer atheist objections to this verse, right? Because that's the context of where this came from. When my man, you know, came on the program and I interviewed him about being ex-Hebrew Israelite, and I was an atheist, so he brought this up. My man Miguel, right? But since you're in here and you asked this, I'm going to deal with it. if the Edomites burnt the temple and it says the Lord going to take vengeance of his temple, where's the salvation for Edomites? Okay. I just gotta expose you, bro. I'm sorry. Number one, it does not say the Edomites burnt the temple. This shows the basic lack of ability to comprehend literary texts that the Hebrew Israelites have. It doesn't say that the Edomites burnt the temple. What it says is that the Edomites were encouraging Babylon to raze all of Jerusalem, which would include the temple, to the ground. R-A-Z-E, meaning burn it to the ground. So the Edomites are not the ones who burnt down the temple or Jerusalem. They weren't the ones who came in and destroyed Israel. That was the Babylonians. And I'm sure you know basic Bible history, I hope, that when that happened, that was Babylon. Edom was encouraging them. So you made a mistake in your premise if the Edomites burnt the temple. They didn't burn the temple. They were encouraging Babylon to burn the temple and Jerusalem, right? And it says the Lord going to take vengeance of his temple. Well, that's not exactly what this text says. This says what you did to us is going to happen to you, okay? Then it says, where's the salvation for the Edomites? Now notice that's a total logical disconnect. Just because one group of people encourages something bad to happen to another group of people, and just because God says, because you've done this to this group of people, you will be repaid with justice because of what you've done, none of that entails that any given person within that ethnic group cannot be saved. So your question is totally illogical. It does not read the Bible properly. And I had to take it on since you brought it up because I know you think that's a great question. It is simply not a good question because you don't know what you're doing. I'm sorry, and I'm trying to be respectful, but you got to do better than that, okay? If you're going to come up with these questions, you simply got to do better. I appreciate that you're trying to construct an argument, but it's a failure. Now, you have a further problem in that you think Edomites are actually currently and back then white people. You got a bunch of, white people running around the Middle East? This is just insane that you even think Edomites are white people today. That whole thing is insane. That's why you're trying to do that, because that's what you think. So you have further presuppositions that are driving your poorly framed question. And again, I appreciate you being here. I'm not trying to be personal, but you simply are incorrect on several points just in that little question. Okay, now we do need to move on here. Hey, Mike W., thank you for the super chat. I see you. I think it's funny you got Mr. Peanut as your avatar. I appreciate that. That's legit, man. Oh, Jill17. Hey, keep going, Vocab. Thank you. Uh-oh, you're out of country there. Awesome. International. All right, where's my precepts? We're sitting here reading from Psalm 137. Okay, so now here's what we need to do. What the atheist tries to do with this passage is they try to act as if this is evidence against the Bible. And I'm not going to minimize this passage, but what I want to do is give us several keys or structures by which to understand this passage. But first I need to do some defining of terms. So there's a little bit of teaching to this, and I hope that this helps you guys. So this is not designed to impress atheists today. If any atheist stumbles on this, my guess is, first of all, they won't want to listen because it's a little bit longer. You know, we go an hour and a half. Usually they're not going to put up with that kind of biblical explanation, number one. Number two, they're not going to be impressed by it because of their other presuppositions. And when I say impressed, what I mean is it's not going to really answer what they're getting at. And this is mainly for people who are believers who struggle with these texts, who want to understand them in a better light. That's the primary audience. But you can take these points to explain the truthfulness of the faith to a Hebrew Israelite or an atheist nonetheless. So first of all, let's go back all the way to the early church to a man named Origen. He was a North African church father. You can look him up. Doesn't mean I agree with everything he said, but he made a good point way back in a day when he talked about you need to read any book of the Bible in light of the last book of the Bible. Now, I take that two ways. Number one is we need to read every book of the Bible in context of the whole Bible, because in a lot of ways, reading Psalm 137:9 just stark naked alone can almost contradict almost everything about what we're taught about how to view our enemies, right? And so because of that, we're going to understand the whole Bible in relationship to this verse. Number two, the last book of the Bible is Revelation, and that is there's a symbolic picture there of the crucified Lamb of God, the Lamb who is slain, yet he's victorious, the Lamb who conquers by being killed. And so we take all of the canon in light of the end of the book, the last book of the Bible, as well as everything that came before it. And so that's an important thing, because we don't just throw this text away. That's not what I'm going to say. But nonetheless, we do read it in the full light of God's revelation. And see, even that's what I mean. To an atheist, they're like, full light of God's revelation. What are you talking about? And notice also, I'm assuming that the Bible is unified in its thematic approach and its theology. An atheist doesn't agree with that. They think it's a disparate jumbling of text, right? And so I understand that. Now, Calvin, I think, had the best, simplest little commentary on this when he said, this is but the declaration of a just judgment. Psalm 137:9, which says what the Babylonians have done to Israel will happen to them as well. That's in essence what it's saying. This is but the declaration of a just judgment. And really, you can't get any simpler than that. But let's break this down further. Now, I've mentioned already, this is getting the further context, that this is done by someone who's in exile. And that's clear, the waters of Babylon, right? Read the first verse there, right? So this member of the captivity there, when would this be? That would put them around 587. So there's the who. Now let's do the when. 587 BC, because that's when the Babylonian invasion happened. 587. And what is something that we know Babylonian soldiers would do, and even in ancient Near Eastern warfare, because actually killing the offspring was actually kind of a common thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying that's what was going on. One key thing of what they would do is they would take the baby, and there would be the corner house of like the corner wall, you know what I'm saying, in a house. Like say you're inside a house or a building, and they would throw the baby as hard as they could into the corner of the house of the building to smash it that way. Another thing is similar to actually what the Nazis did to Jews during World War II in certain situations, where you take the baby upside down and you smash it against a wall or something hard of some sort as you hang it by its feet. So the Babylonians had done this to the Israelites, right? So again, this is not easy stuff, right? All right, now continuing on. As we look at this, where would this be? Well, this is by the rivers of Babylon. So this is actually today in our world. This is southern Iraq. That's where Babylon would be. Now, I mentioned earlier that there's poetic language, and this is a lament. That's because something bad has happened, and now there's a lamentation, a cry, a despair, a wail because of something horrible that has happened. So this is giving expression to sadness, and I would even say righteous anger, ultimately. That's what this psalm is doing. And these are, something that we still do, but something like this with the type of language was especially characteristic of a honor and shame-based culture, which Israel and the whole ancient Near East was, and really the Middle East still is. Now, just because I keep on using the phrase poetic doesn't mean I'm saying it doesn't mean anything. For example, I mentioned Origen. I don't go with his strategy all the way because he had another thing he would say, and he would interpret text like this as metaphorical, allegorical, and symbolic. So, for example, killing the baby, dashing its head against the rocks, actually, this is sort of Origen, what he would say sometimes, and sometimes you'll see Catholics say things like this in the modern day. We need to take that actually as any tiny little sin in our life we need to vociferously destroy and go after. I just don't think that's doing the text justice. That type of spiritualizing of the text, I just don't think that's really honest what's happening, right? Do you guys... Okay, I'm just looking at the live chat, making sure it's not too out of control. All right. So, certainly, this is this idea of dashing the little ones against the rocks. It is sort of a general metaphor for defeating one's enemies with a specific thing going on. Hey, Tony Tabana, what's up? Great to see you with the Super Chat. Thank you very much, bro. Let me know if you got any questions. I mentioned you in a recent show with Anthony Rogers as, my fellow Sicilian there, and how I saw you last year at ETS, which I'm trying to get there again, and your Super Chat will help us get to ETS because we are trying to go back. Sorry it's not in Providence this year. It's in Denver, but thank you, bro. Okay, so within that, it's a specific way, and there's a possibility that this idea of the little ones, it could even refer to like destroying the royal line within Babylon, destroying the whole leadership structure. But again, that's not taken away with anything with the shock of this. I'm just giving you some background to understand this better. Now, let's look at this. This visceral language is basically saying, remember, Lord, your promises to us, and remember who you are, and remember what's happened, and please judge the wicked. Because if someone's going to say, hey, this is wrong or wicked, that means they think what the Babylonians did to the Israelites was also wrong or wicked. And we need to ask them, what do you think the punishment should be? What should happen? Well, the punishment is a destructive judgment upon the whole society of Babylon, which will be fulfilled later on. We're going to get into that. And this is something else to remember about who God is, because all this is rooted in his character and nature. This whole psalm, in fact, the whole book of Psalms, of course, the way the prayers and laments go up to him. He is a warrior God. That is a theme of the Old Testament. Hey, what's up, Cherry Love? Good to see you up in here. This is a theme of the Old Testament, that God is a warrior God. Yahweh is a divine warrior. For who? Not just to go wreck shop for no good reason, but for his children. So imagine having the best, the strongest, the most powerful, the most wise father you could imagine. That's our God. And when he sees his children treated this way, this God will act in justice. Now he does it on his own timetable, and he does it how he wants, when he wants, and he does it righteously. But here's one of his children saying, God, remember that fact. Now, the remember language is simply a way to just say, you promised this, here's what's going on. So one thing about this psalm is it unlocks us to pray honest prayers that have honest, raw, naked emotion in them. That's what it does. It unlocks us, it frees us, because we can see this raw emotion crying out to God, right? You guys see that? About the deepest, darkest, worst things that go down. This unlocks us and frees us to show us that's a template that God's people can do, okay? Now, here's where I'm going to get into this. I'm going to explain briefly what an imprecatory psalm is, and then I'm going to tell us to remember some things about imprecatory psalms. This is, I'm going to read this definition verbatim from a book I got, which later on I'll talk to the backpack about books. Imprecatory psalm is the invocation of judgment, calamity, or curse in an appeal to God, who alone is the just judge of all beings. Imprecatory psalm is the invocation of judgment, calamity, or curse in an appeal to God, who alone is the just judge of all beings. So what it's saying is, God, please act in accordance with your character, in accordance with these events. That's what it's saying there. Notice, this is not a command, and that's where the atheists go off. It doesn't say, now, grab a baby and smash it against rocks. It doesn't say that. So this is not some command for us to do this, take matters into our hands. This is a call for God to act. You guys see that? Hey, what's up, John McDermott? Good to see you. Hey, what's up, Inwa? So, these prayers are addressed to God. They're earnest pleadings for God to step in and right wrong matters. They are a legitimate expression for God's saints now and God's saints then. There's a longing for justice. There's a longing for vindication that only God can bring. And the good thing about these prayers, it teaches us another thing, these imprecatory psalms. It teaches that righteous people should have a strong reaction to evil. We should hate sin. We should have a fierce abhorrence of it, I read one commentator said. And we should also have a desire for the good to win, for good to be victorious. Injustice cannot go unanswered forever. Now, what about the imprecatory psalms? Because even though I'm saying there's merit for them, is that the standard way, even in the Old Testament scriptures, the Tanakh, that God's people spoke? Well, let's talk about that. There's only 18 psalms out of all the psalms, which are 150 or 151, but depending on what you're using. But in all those psalms, about 150, there's only 18 psalms which even have what you could call an imprecatory element. So 18 out of 150. However, only 6 psalms can properly be classified as imprecatory psalms proper. It's Psalm 55, Psalm 59, Psalm 69, Psalm 79, Psalm 109, and Psalm 137. Those are the ones. 4 of them are by David, 1 by Asaph, and then there's this one. Now, let's look at that. That's a total of about 368 verses. And this, actually, I'm quoting from a book. So I guess it's probably time for me to talk to Backpack, because to do that, I need to have a book. So, hey, Backpack, you got any good books for us today that'll help us understand imprecatory psalms in Psalm 137 a little bit better? Help us out.
Backpack, magic backpack. I'm the nigga that
thanks, backpack. You come through again. I got quite a stack here. I'm not going to share all these right now. I'm going to hold on to these, backpack, if that's okay. But I do want to show with everybody one right now, okay? Because I'm going to quote from it. The Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties. This is a very helpful book by Gleason L. Archer. Atheists love it because it categorizes all the Bible difficulties in one book. And then what he does is try to deal with them. Here's a quote he has from Psalm 137. The chief motive for this prayer is not a vindictive desire for revenge, but rather it is an earnest wish that Yahweh would manifest himself before the jeering world by catastrophically overthrowing the Chaldean power that had wrought such misery and needless woe back in the days of Jerusalem's demise. That's page 245. Thank you. Very helpful. I might quote one other time from that book as well. Now, as we look through that, we do understand that there is an element of lex talionis in this passage. Lex talionis. What is lex talionis? Well, it's actually a very fair principle. You hear people talk about an eye for an eye or a tooth for tooth like it's a bad thing. But you notice, if you read like the Code of Hammurabi, which in our discussion, the atheist who used to be a Hebrew Israelite brought up. Miguel brought up eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Well, he brought up the Code of Hammurabi. If you look at ancient law codes like that, which societies have law codes, it's no big deal that there was something called the Code of Hammurabi that had laws in it. What's the big deal, right? Now, here's the deal. Here's the deal with that. Check this out. The Code of Hammurabi is an example of inadequate, unfairly measured out justice. And a lot of these A&E, that means ancient Near Eastern codes, are as well. What they do is they have different penalties a lot of times for the rich or the rulers than they do for the poor. And you'll see actually a distinction in how people, in some of the codes, not all of them, okay, and how they're treated. In fact, sometimes the king will be even totally exempt from some of the rules altogether in some of these law codes. The Bible is not like that with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It has to be equally applied to all. And a great example actually takes place in Israel's history. Was not Saul judged for being an unrighteous king, right? Was not David judged for his wicked acts? Was not Solomon? And you go down the list of both Israel and Judah and see that. So there's an equal application of the law. And lex talionis is what has happened will happen, or that should be the proper, punishment should fit the crime. That's actually a biblical principle. Exodus 21:24 is there. And so this law is supposed to prohibit avengers from punishing someone who's a wrongdoer beyond what they had done, right? And it goes back. That's where intentionality comes into play, and that's why you have things like manslaughter as well. And so you don't want things to escalate. It's supposed to be an equal repayment as far as we can do in this life. Now, there is one thing to ask. Just because this is recorded as the heart cry of the psalmist here, does that mean God is okaying it? That's an interesting question. I don't know 100% yet how to deal with that myself, meaning I see it's in the Bible, so God wanted us to read it, and I take that at face value. And I see that this is the legitimate heart cry of the person. Now, I do know this. I do know that it's righteous to wish for proper judgment on wickedness, right? But the specific details, the way it's specifically worded, I don't know yet. I'm still working through that, meaning is that specific action, the specific way it's worded of it, is that something that's their heart cry, which is legitimate, but their expression of the details of it is not necessarily approved of, even though the sentiment might be? I don't know yet. I'm still working through that. But nonetheless, here the psalmist writes imprecation. Sorry, that's a difficult word to pronounce that. And, there's one other thing to look at this, and we don't have time to get into this, but remember, God actually, in certain unusual, rare circumstances, actually had commanded wholesale destruction in specific instances with some of the Canaanite cities. Deuteronomy 20:16-18 includes these instructions, right? But with all that being said, what does God not encourage? He does not encourage murder. The Ten Commandments, Exodus 20:13, Deuteronomy 5:17. He does not encourage us, then or now, to take these matters into their own hands. In fact, one guy writes about how Babylon didn't even have the the proper kind of setup for this to be. It's a long story, but it's from another book. I'm not going to actually read the quote because I can't verify everything he's saying in there, but this is a very interesting book as well, similar to the other book called Hard Sayings of the Bible. Kaiser, David's Baruch. It'd be interesting to see what they have. Like I said, I got some of a quote there, but I'm not actually going to read the quote from that book in regards to Psalm 137 in its entirety. Now, here's something that's very interesting I want to show you guys about David himself. And the reason I bring up David is because David was the author of some of the imprecatory psalms himself. Now, not this one particularly, but notice David, when he had a chance for vengeance on someone who was seeking his life, who was trying to murder him. Remember King Saul? What happened? David did not take the chance to gain, to kill him. Remember that? He had a couple times. He could have killed Saul, but he did not. And I'll look at this, Psalm 35, 12 through 14. They repay me evil for good. My soul is bereft. But I, when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my chest. I went about as though I grieved for my friend or my brother, as one who laments his mother. I bowed down in mourning. See that? So David is saying there in Psalm 35, and like I said, remember he wrote some imprecatory psalms, not this one in particular. He is talking about having a state of sadness, sackcloth and ashes, for his enemies who were trying to kill him when they were sick. Do you guys catch that? So, he actually showed kindness to his enemies, and that's there in the Old Testament. My point is that the imprecatory psalms, although are a very real, legitimate expression, and certainly are in the Bible, are not all there is to God's people's expression. There are a minority selection of verses. What that means is that it's select. If all you find yourself doing is identifying with imprecatory psalms, you might have an issue. In fact, there is such a cult in our day that does that very thing. Now, the clip I'm about to play is filled with anger and hatred, even though it's like only 40 seconds long. And in fact, it contains swearing. So if you do not want to hear that kind of thing, go ahead and mute yourself. Don't listen to this. Block it out. It's actually only 20 seconds, actually. I'm going to play it. This is from GMS, Great Millstone Israelites, who are in the chat. Now, again, this is mainly to deal with atheist objections, but since the Hebrew Israelites are here, and since an ex-Hebrew Israelite brought this up, I'm going to show you an example of the way Hebrew Israelites out on the street, this is in Chicago. I've actually had the unfortunate experience, now I brought it upon myself, I went out there on purpose with G-Con and Cherry, what's up, of dealing with GMS Chicago. This is GMS Chicago about a year and a half ago, talking about Psalm 137. And again, it has explicit language, so you might not want to hear this. So I've already given you the fair warning, but I want to play it without beeping out because I want you guys to hear it. Okay, you guys ready? Yeah, they do swear in this clip. Okay, so just so you know you're ready, I'm going to play this clip real quick. And the point of this is to show that, yes, it's legitimate expression, but you see how it's not the sum and total of the Christian life. If a person operates that way, that's not really in the spirit of the book, it's not really in the spirit of the Bible, it's not in the spirit of the Psalms, it's not in the spirit of the psalmist, it's not in the spirit of David, and most certainly it's not in the spirit of Christ or the New Testament Christian. But nonetheless, that's the essence of their religion. It's a revenge-based fantasy. All right, here we go.
Against the stone. So happy is the man that taketh your little fucking white babies and smash them against the fucking stone. That's right. That's thus saith the Bible, man. All right. Y'all think Nat Turner or something? Wait till you see the 144, man. That's right. Get Micah 5 and 8, man.
All right, now let's talk about that. What's going on there? First of all, it's funny they got the sirens in the background. Obviously, they don't control that, but it just makes it this whole intense, psychotic, wild scene, right? Because you got the blaring of the sirens, and I know where they are because that's close to where Cherry, what's up, Cherry, and me and LeBron debated these guys. Now, I don't remember these guys' face per se, but nonetheless. So he says, read Psalm 137, and notice GMS's cultic misinterpretations being read into the verse at the very beginning. Little white babies. Does Psalm 137 say anything about what the babies would look like? Their skin tone, their religious, their ethnicity? No. Were the Babylonians white? No. Everything we see from the Babylonians, from ancient reliefs. Now, we don't really see the skin color usually per se, designates somewhat similarities to people in the Levant area today, meaning in southern Iraq today. Now, has southern Iraq changed? Of course it's changed in that time, but it's changed so radically as if it's a different people group there, with no association prior, and you can't get a general idea from the Middle East? No. So what's my point by saying all that? Those aren't white people. They're not black people. We know what they look like. Dark, olive, and no, not green or black. We mean olive is in the skin tone, right? Sometimes people say muddy brown. You'll see sometimes a more pale, kind of tannish, beigeish color. It's weird to describe the human skin tone. And other times you see darker, right? There's a desert environment to a lot of this, right? Now, the environment has changed somewhat to an extent as well, it seems. Nonetheless, white babies, where in the world does that come into play? It has nothing to do with it. Now, part of what he's doing there is ripping this verse out of context, right? Because that's what GMS excels in, to satisfy his anger and rage and make it about white babies, which it's not. So the Babylonians are white, so where does he get that from? Where the Edomites, who are mentioned in here, remember, this is not even directed at them. It's primarily directed at the Babylonians. But nonetheless, were the Edomites white? Again, we know what they looked like by and large. We can go back and see these ancient depictions of these people in reliefs and things, and their features are like Middle Easterners. Now, there's been a lot more mixing and matching and all that type of thing. But remember, everybody's from Adam, Acts 17. And nonetheless, these are not white people. So where does he get white from? Because of the false conception that they believe Edomites are actually modern-day white people, meaning white people are actually Edomites. And so that's where he gets that from. But it's just total mess up. And then he says, if you off that Nat Turner was something, wait till you see the 144. What's he saying by that? I'm going to play this clip one more time, by the way. I'm just breaking it down to show you how not to handle the Bible. With that, what he's saying is Nat Turner, who said he had a vision from God and led a slave rebellion. Now, people have different perspectives on that. And I got to say, if you read really what is happening in slavery and you start to get a sense of it, you'll become angry if you have a strong sense of justice. You'll probably cry at times because it's so heart-wrenching. I'm talking about really reading what was going on in slavery. I don't just mean like general. I mean specifics. It is horrible. And you could see how a person would act the way Nat Turner acted. Now, you may say, whoa, that's shocking. Now, am I saying that everything that happened or all that was a good idea? I'm not saying all that. In fact, Nat Turner's dream of a rebellion that would take over the South didn't happen, so you have to wonder, was that really from God? Because it ended up in all of them dying. But part of what they did is they actually did kill the white babies while they were in the cribs with the parents. They would go into the rooms during this uprising that happened a long time ago, and they actually killed a lot of the babies of the slave masters as well. You would understand the rationale, I think. Well, hey, they're just going to grow up to be white racist slave masters as well. You know what I'm saying? Blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, what he's saying is if you thought that was bad, white people, as if Italians of today, who weren't even by and large on the American continent, Eastern Europeans who weren't even by and large on the American continent during that time, as if they have something to do. Now, remember, these guys believe reincarnation, so in their twisted mind, they do have something to do with it. It's really bizarre, but nonetheless, he's saying, wait till the 144. Now, there's another misinterpretation. He's referring to the 144,000 out of Revelation, who, if you read about the 144,000, the GMS interpretation of that is also incorrect. And I've done some stuff on that. I might do some stuff on that in the future as well. But that's what he's saying, because he's viewing the 144,000 as sort of, the elite of Israel. So let me play this one more time just to show you how incorrect these guys handle the text. Here we go.
Against the stone. So happy is the man that taketh your little fucking white babies and smash them against the fucking stone. That's right. That's thus said the Bible, man. All right? Y'all think Nat Turner or something? Wait till you see the 144, man. That's right. Get Micah 5 and 8, man.
Yeah, Hebrewsites are funny. They always tell the Christian apologists, they always say, hey, don't be in your emotions. Don't get in your feelings. When you watch Hebrewsites on the street, doesn't it seem like they just all in their feelings? All this man is doing is venting his emotions. These dudes ain't got no kind of emotional control or discipline. It's funny that they say that. Now, it's interesting. Let's look at this. I want to take you to something in Isaiah. This is relevant. Everyone come back in. If you were kind of thrown off by that, everyone come back in. We're going back to the Bible text. I know when we dealt with the Hebrew Israelites, we had to leave the Bible text a little bit because they leave the Bible with their wacky interpretations. But now we've got to go back to the Bible text, right? Here we are in Isaiah 13. This is very instructive to understanding all of this. This is an oracle by the prophet against Babylon. This is after the exile and deportation and destruction of Jerusalem at the hands of the Babylonians. Listen to Isaiah 13, everybody. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saw. On a bare hill raise a signal. Cry aloud to them. Wave the hand for them to enter. The gates of the nobles. I myself have commanded my consecrated ones and have summoned my mighty men to execute my anger, my proudly exalting ones. So Yahweh is saying, I have righteous anger about Babylon, and now it's going to be executed in just judgment. That's what he's saying there in Isaiah 13:3. So follow along here. The sound of tumult is on the mountains, as of a great multitude. The sound of an uproar of kingdoms, of nations gathering together. Specifically, this is going to be fulfilled with the Medes and the Persians when they conquer Babylon. The Lord of hosts is mustering a host for battle. So notice God is saying that even the wicked armies of the world, who are pagan, idolatrous, and all that, I'm ultimately in control and charge of. They come from a distant land, from the end of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation, to destroy the whole land. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. Notice the Bible talks about the day of Lord in lots of contexts. So there's thousands of days of Lords in the Bible. There's not one. Now there's a final, ultimate day of the Lord in which Christ comes back. But the day of the Lord is a motif that means judgment, reckoning by Yahweh's hand. As destruction from the Almighty it will come. Therefore all hands will be feeble, and every human heart will melt. They will be dismayed. Pangs and agony will seize them. They will be in anguish like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at one another. Their faces will be aflame. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation. This is talking about Babylon now, not Jerusalem. And destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising, and the moon will not shed its light. By the way, that shows that language really is what's called decreation language, and I don't think we should always have to take it as literally, because that's saying that's going to happen during the days of Babylon, but people sometimes get out of control in the modern era with blood moons and stuff. It's just really saying things are going to get shook up, basically. So let me continue reading Isaiah 13 here. I will punish the world for its evil, when the wicked for their iniquity. I'll put it into the pomp of the arrogant, and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. I will make people more rare than fine gold, and mankind the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts, in the day of his fierce anger. And like a hunted gazelle, or like sheep with none to gather them, each will turn to his own people, and each will flee to his own land. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed in pieces before their eyes. Do you see that? This is directly from Psalm 137. So there's a prophetic element to Psalm 137, in that this is his heart's cry. And Isaiah picks up on that language and saying this is what's going to happen to Babylon. So actually the Psalm 137 prayer, the more I think about it and look at it, it's a prophetic prayer that is actually answered later on, in essence. Do you see that? Their houses will be plundered and their wives ravished. That means these are the same things the Babylonians did to the Israelites in the 580s. Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them. So Isaiah actually gives prophecy here specifically. This is further proof of the Bible's supernatural origin and character, who have no regard for silver and do not delight in gold. It's saying they're just going to want to crush you. That's what they're about. Their bows will slaughter the young men. They will have no mercy on the fruit of the womb, and their eyes will not pity children. Again, there's that motif. You see that? And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, and splendor in the pomp of the Chaldeans, will be like Sodom and Gomorrah when God overthrew them. So God's not raining down fire from heaven like he did with Sodom and Gomorrah, but he's saying that the Medes and the Persians will act as his judgment in this context, and so they're his hands of executing his will in this instance. It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations. Now, I think that's somewhat of a hyperbole, because there's people down there. So that's where we see the poetic aspect to understand there's a hyperbole to say it's not going to be like it was, right? No Arab will pitch his tent there. No shepherds will make their flocks lie down there. But wild animals will lie down there, and their houses will be full of howling creatures. Their ostriches will dwell, and their wild goats will dance. Hyenas will cry in its towers, and jackals in the pleasant palaces. Its time is close at hand, and its days will not be prolonged. Let me look at something. I'm curious if they mentioned that. Yeah, basically it's just saying that there was splendor and pomp, but now animals are going to dwell there instead. It's going to be empty and in ruins for a while. Now there's other taunts there against Babylon, but let's talk about that for a little bit, everybody. We need to talk about it. I think that helps really show things, because I want to get into the specifics of what happened to Babylon, because the way it would work is the Medes and the Persians fulfill this and dealt with Babylon this way. And interestingly enough, actually, Queen Esther's husband had a hand in fulfilling this verse. And when did that happen? Well, notice that Cyrus, that's Queen Esther's husband, actually, right? He is actually referred to as like an anointed one of God in Isaiah 44:28 and Isaiah 45:1, doing God's bidding in essence. And in 539, Cyrus the Great marched on Babylon. Now let me give you the background to this. And by the way, I'm taking some of this information from some articles I'm going to share with you later on, okay? There was propaganda that the Babylonians had spread about their kindness and respect that the Medes and Persians gave. They had propaganda about how kind they were to the inhabitants of conquered cities. Now, there's some truth to that. The Medes and the Persians at this time were kinder than the Babylonians and the Assyrians before them in the way they dealt with things. And you can actually see that in Ezra and Nehemiah. Do you see how the Persians dealt with Israel versus the Babylonians and especially the Assyrians? You notice the difference there? And so there's propaganda like, hey, we're going to conquer your city, but we're not going to treat you wrong. And in fact, at this time in Babylon, it was ran tyrannical. And this is a common thing of empires destroying themselves from the inside. This is the common way they destroy themselves. And so when Cyrus the Great, the Persian ruler, came into Babylon, his history shows us that he basically came in with almost no resistance. He just took over Babylon quickly. No one would have ever thought that could have happened. But it is what happened. It's crazy to think that this is the way Babylon would have fallen. Little bloodshed. Nabonidus and his son and co-regent Belshazzar, on the night of the attack, they were partying with holy vessels which were plundered from Jerusalem's temple. Crazy, right? And these Babylons had been under a bad economic situation, and there had been a bunch of plagues and epidemics. And the ruler at the time was neglecting the gods, and it really hadn't been around. So they basically saw Cyrus as a liberator. According to what we understand, the Babylonians spread green branches before him to welcome him. And so these nations that Babylon had conquered prior and that were exiled were actually glad when Babylon fell. Imagine being a Jew living in a Babylonian city. You actually were glad that the Persians came in and conquered. And what did Cyrus do? By and large, he freed the exiles, he returned the holy vessels, and allowed people to return to their homelands and rebuild the temples. And we actually see that in the Bible, right? Now, this thing was fulfilled a little bit further in 482 BC. What happened there? The Babylonians rebelled against the Persian Empire. This is a common thing. People get conquered and they try to rebel. The Jews did this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it does not. The king at that time was Xerxes. And he's the one who married... I messed up. Excuse me. I made a mistake earlier. I don't know why I did that. I jumbled my notes. I was saying Cyrus was Esther's husband. That was a mistake. I don't know why I was saying that. I was jumping the gun in my brain. Xerxes is Esther's husband. That's what I meant when I was saying earlier there would be Esther's husband would have a hand in fulfilling this, because this is the ultimate fulfillment here in 482. Apologies for that. Cyrus was called the Anointed One, was not Esther's husband. I don't know why I said that. Again, apologies. Xerxes was, though. That's what I was referring to. I just incorrectly explained it at the time in the beginning there. So excuse me on that. So here you got Esther from the Old Testament book of Esther, of course, who married Xerxes. And what did he do? Because of the rebellion. Now, see, the Persians, first of all, weren't the same people they were back then. Excuse me. And second of all, when you rebelled, it was a different story. So he demolished the city of Babylon. And so the nation that had razed, R-A-Z-E-D, meaning burnt to the ground, Judah, years, centuries really earlier, was now raised. The full repayment. Now, here's what's interesting, though. You can kind of get a glimpse of this process of how God uses nations and then judges them when they go beyond what they were basically supposed to do in Isaiah 10. For example, God specifically told his people he was going to use Assyria. Now, this is prior to the Babylonian invasion. This is when that happened to the northern kingdom. He said he was going to use Assyria to judge Israel. But now watch in Isaiah 10 what Isaiah had said to Assyria. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger and the staff in whose hand is my indignation. So he's saying you're an instrument of my judgment there, God. This is Isaiah 10. This is prior. I will send him against an ungodly nation and against the people of my wrath. Yet he does not mean so, nor does his heart think so, but it is his heart to destroy and cut off not a few nations. So notice there that they're supposed to be doing the judgment, but they went above what they're supposed to do. They cruelly and arrogantly abused their power. And so guess what Yahweh then promised to do to wicked Assyria in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 12. Quote, therefore it shall come to pass, when the Lord has performed all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, that he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the glory of his haughty looks. So Assyria's wickedness for Israel, even though that's what they're supposed to do, that got judged. Do you guys see all that? So that's very interesting to take into account. Now, I'm going to show you guys some things that you need to remember about imprecatory psalms. How we doing, everybody? Well, we got a lot of people watching, almost 80 people. That's awesome. Hey, have I missed anybody in the super chat? Because I know I'm kind of getting to the Bible text. When I'm doing these more heavy kind of Bible lessons, it's a little difficult to pay attention to the super chat as much, everybody. I hope you understand, though. Let me get a drink here before I get into the next thing here. 3 dislikes. Offset that, everybody. If you're up in here and you like what we're talking about, please hit the like button if you have not already. Subscribe to the channel. If you can, do Patreon. If you can't, don't worry about it. I love you. You know, PayPal, Cash App, that's just there for people who understand what, it's all good. So let me look. There's 3 things I want to now have us remember in regards to the imprecatory psalms. But before we do that, I actually want to show you guys something. I'm going to show you guys some pictures. Are you guys ready for that? All right, here we go. Let me show you some pictures here, everybody. Hold on. It's doing that. Okay, I see what it's doing. All right, let me bring in these pictures here. This is important. I want to try to break up the content a little bit, and I want to have you guys see some things, okay? So, here we go. Thank you. I see a lot of likes happening. That was good. You guys are awesome. So, you see this picture right here? What is that? What is that? That is a relief that is now in the British Museum from the siege of Lachish. I may be mispronouncing it. Excuse me if I am. These were found in Nineveh. Nineveh is basically modern-day Mosul in Iraq. And I'm going to show a bunch of different ones. There's different rooms in the palace of Sennacherib that demonstrated the power of the Assyrian war machine. And there's different panels. And interestingly, this Lachish was actually took place in the Bible. If you look at like 2 Kings 18:7, for example, there's a place where you'll see some of this. And so these are what's called reliefs. These have been in here for 2,500 years, right? They were discovered in the 1800s. And I think you get a sense of what's going on here. Now, here's what's very interesting. I'm showing this one first for a specific reason. Going back to our text, remember it says, hey, why don't you sing us a song, you conquered people? Yeah, sing us a song about your happy place where you were. Sing us a song. Do a dance, play your lyre, sing us a song while we march you away from your homeland as we just killed your people. They're parading these prisoners of war before Sennacherib, who's not shown. He'd be on the right of this relief. And these are probably, oh man, I'm getting so many messages. People got to give me just a break when I'm doing this. And here these prisoners are playing, if you notice, lyres, Lyres. And these 3 musicians are probably Judean prisoners. By the way, if you see the features, these don't look like, quote, black or white people, do they? They look like Middle Easterners, but whatever. They're being marched under escort through some kind of mountainous country. Excuse me, I said Sennacherib was on the right. That's a different relief I'm going to show you later. So Sennacherib is not on the right of this one. I'm sorry. Now, from their dress, archaeologists are able to determine that most likely they came from somewhere to the west of Assyria, so maybe Phoenicia, right? And this recalls the lament of Psalm 137. So this is probably from about Assyria 700 to 692 when you see this. But do you guys see that? That's an example of literally what this is talking about. By the way, what else does that show us? That also shows us the accuracy of the biblical text. It's referring to real events. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one. This one's a little different. I have to put it on the side of me. You see what they're doing there? They're impaling people. See how they're hanging them up and killing them? This is after they conquered Lachish there. And I'm sorry for my pronunciation on that. I apologize for that. But you see they're running them through. So this is before they're getting marched around. I'm showing you the scenes of cruelty at the hands of the Assyrians. Now what's going on here? This is where they're making them pay homage. This is probably the heads of the rebellion. And this is the one I was mentioning where Sennacherib would have been on the right. Pay homage to the gods of the Assyrians and to Sennacherib himself. You see that? Most likely that's what's going on there. You see how they're bowing down, they're genuflecting. And you can see the Semitic peoples in the middle, most likely the Judeans from Lachish there. And in the back, what do you see? You see the Assyrian captors with the hats on. Let me show you another one. This is decapitation. So if you look on the left of this, you see the Assyrian about to lop off the guy's head. And now some of this has been cut away. You can't entirely see it, but if you look on the right side, there's a body form that looks kind of what we would call flaccid or placid. I know I forgot how to pronounce that too. Man, my brain. I need some more coffee. Excuse me. Let me get a drink real quick of this. Yeah. And most likely that would have shown someone who was already decapitated, because I didn't show it, but actually there's a couple scenes of this where it's just heads stacked upon heads. Pretty gruesome. The treatment by the Assyrians to their people that they had captured. Oh, I'm going to show that one last. Hold on. Yeah, let me show this one now. Okay, you guys ready? Where'd it go? This is, to me, the worst one. Okay, let's look at this closely. On the left, you see children down there. That's the little people. See the little people? I'm going to kind of... Can I zoom in? No, it's not letting me zoom in. It's only letting me zoom out. I can't get the picture any bigger. I'm sorry, folks. But if you notice, there's Assyrian soldiers grouped two by two. There's 4 of them, it looks like, on the left, in between looks like the mother and her children, and these bodies on the right, which are behind more soldiers. What's happening? Well, if you notice, these human forms seem naked, and there almost seems to be muscle tone there. And by the way, this is from archaeologist notes. I'm not making up with the pictures what's happening. I'm reading it from the archaeologist notes themselves, okay? So it's not like I'm not an A&E archaeologist, clearly, but I'm just bringing this to you guys. They're filleting them. Filleting, and if you notice, you can kind of see like a blade in their hand. It's where you actually peel the skin off of the person while they're alive. They're filleting these people while they're alive. So they stretch them out that way and then actually peel the skin off of them while they're alive. Do you see that? That is what they are doing there. I mean, yeah. So that is cruelty. To say the least. And again, that's the essence of the psalm right there, that picture, that relief as it's called. Now, is that helpful for you guys to see stuff like that? Does that shine some light on it? I'm trying to look to see where your comments are. I see you guys arguing a little bit about moderation, this and that. Let's just chill on that. I really want you guys to see this, because to me those pictures are very important. And if you want to see all of them, I'm actually going to tell you how to find them, okay? You go to, this is the name of the website, Ancient History, etc. So the website is etc.ancient.eu. And just within that, it's published February 7, 2017. Look for The Siege of Lachish, released at the British Museum. An article by Osama Amin. And there's actually a lot more pictures I didn't even show. Now, this is not from the Babylonian invasion I'm speaking of, but this is a similar example that shows you what was going on. And remember, I had just mentioned the cruelty of the Assyrians, and so I wanted to make sure that we got into that to show you why they were being judged and how God's process works, where he judges nations who judge nations when they judge wrongly. Now, while I'm on that, I'm going to show you 3 articles that I recommend about this topic in general from Psalm 137 that if you want to go further might be able to help you. Okay, let me do it real quick here. Where to go? Okay. All right. Here's one. I found this to be a helpful article. It's at crosswalk.com. It's a lot shorter, but it had 5 things you never knew about Psalm 137:9. And I took some of my information from there. I hate all these ads, but that's a good one. And then a lot of what I'm about to say now comes from this, from Bible.org. This is kind of long, and there's a sermon attached to it. And so that's pretty helpful. That's actually by a pastor here in Arizona on Bible.org. And here's one, which I'm not getting into much, but this is really good, especially against atheists, because he talks about how Dan Barker, a well-known atheist, brought it up in a debate. Kyle Butts, at a presuppositional apologist who does a lot of debates with atheists and stuff. He discusses that article at apologeticspress.org, and that's a good one. And then there's the ancient history site. So there's some sites. We're not really looking through those, but I just wanted to show you that so you can see where I got some stuff that I think was helpful. All right, now, here's the things we need to remember when we look at these, okay? As I refer back to my notes. And it's like this. Number one, as we look at these Psalms in the Bible as a whole, we must remember a number of things about God's character. Number one, God is a just judge. God is a just judge. 2 Thessalonians 1, 6 through 9 talks about the future judgment, the day of the Lord. God is a just judge. He will judge. He has judged. That's a key thing to remember. Secondly, God is a sharing and giving God. He blesses and rewards. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. What does it say, right? Genesis 12, 1 through 3 talks about a promise made to Abraham and his progeny that says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So he blesses and rewards. He's a sharing and giving God. And he doesn't have to do this. He's under no obligation to do this, but he does do this. And he purposed to bless humanity through Abraham. That's a promise given explicitly there, that I'll bless the families of the earth, or the tribes or the nations of the earth, through your seed. And who is that seed according to Galatians? It's Jesus. And who are the modern day descendants of Abraham according to that same book, Galatians? It's the church. It's Christians. That's explicitly stated in Galatians 3. Third thing to remember about these imprecatory psalms, and when you read judgment texts like this. So, firstly, God is a just judge. Secondly, God is a sharing and giving God. He blesses and rewards. Thirdly, God keeps his promises. So God is covenantly faithful. He had promised Abraham these things, and all the way back in Genesis 3:15, he made promises, right? And he promised to fully repay Babylon for what it had done, to level its walls. In fact, if you look at Jeremiah 51, 56 through 58. And so that's not a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal. If you look at the Babylonians' walls, they are 42 to 56 miles in circumference, 11 feet thick, 75 feet high, watchtowers and a moat outside, reinforced by an inner wall that was 21 feet thick, 300 feet high, towers that were 420 feet high every 60 feet. And there was other inner walls. You can get more of this from the Zondervan Pictorial Encyclopedia in the Bible. God was saying, I'm going to bring down those walls, Babylon, and he did. Babylon seemed unassailable when Psalm 137 was penned, and indeed when Isaiah and Jeremiah wrote what they wrote. But he fulfills things even in line with not only his word, but the prayers of his people, Daniel 9, 2 through 3. So we must remember that. Now, not only do you remember not only do you remember God's character, but we need to remember the psalmist's attitude. So remember God's character, and remember the psalmist's attitude. The two key things there. What's God's character? I gave you 3 things about God's character. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to show you. And again, a lot of this is from the article by the pastor in Flagstaff on Bible.org I mentioned. I've adapted it and truncated it down, but I'm giving credit where credit is due. I showed you the website and all that. But I'm taking things and putting them all together, right? Because this is just this section, not the rest of the stuff. Firstly, the psalmist was not seeking personal vengeance, and that goes for you, GMS, because that's exactly what you guys are after. Instead, he's asking God to take action. He's asking God to act justly. He's not saying, give me an opportunity, and I'll get those guys. I can't wait to get them. He's saying, God, you avenge the evil. Who does vengeance belong to? Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, right? Secondly, the psalmist was concerned about God's cause, not his cause. So again, remembering the psalmist's attitude is about God's glory. It's about God's holiness, God's righteousness. So that's important to remember about God's character, the psalmist's attitude. Now, one other set of things when we read the imprecatory Psalms, we must remember, and this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time, and then actually we're getting close to being done, everybody. But we've got a lot of great people watching. You guys have really sustained. We're almost up to 100 people, and we are going to do a freestyle here, by the way. We are going to do a freestyle here, by the way, everybody. All right, check this out. The full light of the New Testament. We can't throw away the Old Testament. I'm not doing that. Jesus did not contradict the essence of the Old Testament, the spirit of it. He did not contradict it. Matthew 5:17. That verse gets misused, but at the same time, just because it gets misused, we can't act like it doesn't mean anything. When he says, I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill it. So the New Testament is a more complete revelation to God's people than the Old, but it does not contradict it. The Old Testament's not erroneous, and the New Testament comes in and corrects it. But now the incomplete revelation is completely fulfilled. So we take these Psalms in light of the New Testament, and here's the 4 things we understand. One I really mentioned, but I'm not going to go into too much more detail. It has to do with lex talionis. But here's the thing. What are we supposed to do now? Now, again, even in the Old Testament, Leviticus 19:18 said, do not avenge yourself, but let justice be administered. That's Old Testament. Leviticus 19, you hear that? Do not avenge yourself, but let justice be administered. Now, watch this, though. That's the sense of it. Let me read the quote. I'm sorry. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. That's the quote from Leviticus 19:18. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Now, we need to go to Romans to look at this. This is the full light of how we need to approach these things now. What does Paul say in Romans? Because we're not saying this contradicts it. We're saying, how do we function and look now? What do we see? Number 1, in Romans 13, vengeance and judgment is supposed to be carried out by the state. Now, does the state always do it? No, but they are the ones who do not bear the sword in vain. But when we look at Romans chapter 12, verse 12, what's it say? Rejoice in hope. So these are instructions to Christians today. Rejoice in hope, Christian. Be patient in tribulation, Christian. Be constant in prayer, Christian. Verse 13 of Romans 12. Contribute to the needs of the saints, Christian. Seek to show hospitality, Christian. And I would say that even includes to your enemies. Jesus taught that. Listen to verse 14, everybody. Bless those who persecute you. By the way, sometimes people say Paul never quoted Jesus. Is he not clearly alluding to something Jesus said there in Romans 12? Yeah. Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. So, to the Hebrews lights up in here, you guys think that you're supposed to curse people. In fact, you take it literally, saying F-bombs and stuff like that. But notice it says here, bless those who persecute you. Do you guys bless those who persecute you? Bless and do not curse them. I don't think that you do. But nonetheless, look at verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And us understanding the heartfelt shock and awe and terror of Psalm 137, including verse 9, has to do with weeping with those who weep. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more into the New Testament aspect of it as well. But as we look, you do see an implicit command to have love for enemies even in the Old Testament. In fact, you can see that you should render assistance to your enemies in Exodus 23, 4 through 5. Proverbs 25:21, right? Heap flaming coals on their head by being kind to them. Remember that? What did David do? He showed kindness to King Saul. What did Joseph do? He showed kindness to his brothers and forgave them, didn't he? All right, now, when we look at that, we see that Jesus in Matthew 5:44 helps us understand the full interpretation. Oh, I'm dropping stuff. And I actually want to read this from Matthew 5:44. Just give me a second here. Now, does that mean that there's never a time to rebuke with strong words? No, Jesus did to the Pharisees in Matthew 23. Paul did as well in Galatians 1, 8 through 9, didn't he? And in fact, you see that happen something similar in Acts 13 with Paul and Elymas. So I'm not saying that never happens. There's like a personal level, then there's like a judicial level, right? And I think it's better to default at the personal level of forgiveness. Matthew chapter 5, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So that's not from the Bible. We're saying that's what you've heard said. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father. That's how you show you're a son of the Father, who is in heaven. Notice, even Jesus here is taking it upon the realm of ethnicity in relationship to who you're descended from. He's saying, you really want to be a son of the Father? You do these things. It's not about ethnic lineage. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? The rhetorical answer to the question is none. Do not even the tax collectors do the same? So it's saying like the worst of the worst. Ironically, Matthew is a tax collector. So Matthew is writing this, understanding that while he was a former tax collector. Isn't that interesting? Verse 47, and if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Hey, so Hebrew Israelites, you got to greet me on the street when you see me. Do not even the Gentiles do the same? At least be good as Gentiles, guys, right? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Some people are like, wait, what? Why is that last verse in there? Matthew 5:48. Here's why it's in there. None of us can be perfect. Some people say, well, God wouldn't command something if we couldn't do it. What are you talking about? Do you envy? Have you ever coveted? Yes, you have. Then why did God say, don't be envious? Because he knew you would be able to keep that command? No. Everything he commands you can't keep. Be perfect as God is perfect. That's how you show you're a son of the Father. None of us keep it. So guess what? The judgment of Babylon that they received, the judgment that Israel received, the judgment that Assyria received, the judgment that Persia later on would receive, basically through the hands of the Greeks and the Medes, we deserve that same judgment. Our families destroyed, us, all that. But God shows grace and mercy, meaning we're guilty as well. And that's a Christological way to look at these texts, to understand I am also guilty. I am part of the wicked. Because you cannot be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. All of us fall short of that standard. In fact, that's what the Bible says in Romans, doesn't it? All fall short of the glory of the God. The wages of sin is death, right? That's Romans 3. That's Romans 6. So what does that mean for us? We deserve that judgment. Well, wait a minute. Was there one who was perfect as his Father in heaven was perfect? Yes, there's one who said, I only do and say what the Father says and does. I don't do anything else he tells me. That's where the righteousness of Christ comes in. It's not our own righteousness. It's not, just try your hard as you can to do these things and you'll be okay. It's no, you must, and guess what? We all fail. But that's where you line up with Jesus. You're in union with him, and he gives you his righteousness if you believe in him. 2 Corinthians 5:21, he who knew no sin became sin. This is the gospel message that can be derived even out of this psalm. And if you guys say, wait, you're stretching it now, Vocab. I don't think we should do that with the Psalms. How do you get there from Psalm 137? Well, let me show you something. This is from a good little book the Backpack gave about poetic books in the Old Testament. And what they do is they show that there is a messianic Christological interpretation that we need to apply to these in our New Testament context. We don't deny the historical situation. That's not what we do. But we understand that when we look at the New Testament, how did it utilize Psalms? Well, great places in John 15:25. If you read that, Jesus is clearly alluding to, he's actually citing it, Psalm 35:19, 69, and 4. And he makes it apply to himself. But they have done this in order that the word may be fulfilled that is written in their law, they hated me without cause. Do you see? Christologically applied to Jesus. Although originally it wasn't. He does the same thing in John 2:17 with Psalm 69:9. His disciples remembered what it was written, zeal for thy house will consume me. That wasn't about Jesus originally, was it? Do you see? All the Bible should be Christologically interpreted after you understand the initial context. So you don't just skip to Jesus. You got to work to get there, but then you don't leave that part out. Acts 1:20. Peter applied Psalm 69:25 and 109:8 to Judas. Let his homestead be made desolate, and let no man dwell in it, and his office let another man take. This also happened with Paul in Romans 15:3. With Psalm 69:9. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached thee fell upon me. Meaning, the reproach that we should have had fell upon who? Jesus. He took our sin. Paul did the same thing in Romans 11:9-10, where he interpreted the Psalm of Psalm 69:22-23 that David was writing as a fulfillment of the blindness of the Jewish nation. So that's not necessarily Christocentric, but it does relate to Christ. But it shows how the New Testament interpretation is all Christ-centered. And then the same thing happens there in Psalm 109:31. So there is a precedent, right? There's a precedent to understand these things in a Christocentric way. Now we're getting here, guys. We're getting here. Don't worry. We're going. So, in light of the cross, what do we offer to God's enemies? Now, all of us are God's enemies. Remember, children of wrath, sons of disobedience, Ephesians 2. All of us are God's enemies prior to the cross. While we were yet at enmity, enemies with God, sinners, Christ died for us. We offer the ministry of reconciliation in our context. So it's not saying judgment will happen. It will. 2 Corinthians 5, 18 through 19. We offer the ministry of reconciliation. The chief of sinners found mercy. 1 Timothy 1, 15, 16, right? Anyone on this planet can find mercy. And Jesus brings mercy to those who repent and condemnation and judgment to those who don't. John 3, 18, John 3, 36. God's revealed will to us is that he would not want the wicked to experience what they're going to face. I don't take pleasure in the death of the wicked. His revealed will to us is that they would repent and live. Now, I say revealed will, that's according to Ezekiel 18:23, 32, because we don't know his secret will, meaning we don't know who God has and who he doesn't have. Now, with all that being looked at, we understand this in a much more complete way. But even though I want to make sure that gospel application is there, I do want to say, and this is from the book of Bible Difficulties, that it still is appropriate to pray with great earnestness that God will intervene to crush the wicked and visit on a rebellious world the destruction that it so richly deserves. But in the meantime, we preach the gospel in love, because under the new covenant, God has shown his judgment on sin in another way. Calvary. That is how he has judged sin. Now, this is the last thing I need to say, okay? Now, I had a whole nother section about more modern-day application, but we don't have time to get it because I got to get this freestyle. So here's what I need to do, everybody. Here's what I need to do. I do need to end with this. Jesus quoted Psalm 139 and Luke 19:44. And the way he know that he's referring to it is because this verb in its Greek form is only found in one place in the Septuagint, the LXX, which is Psalm 137:9. And then it's also in Luke 19:44. He also quoted Psalm 69 and 109. So he applied it to the destruction of Jerusalem. And so there's a sense of when Psalm 137 is just a sense of what will happen to all unbelievers if they do not repent. And where do you see that? Again, we interpret it in light of the whole Bible and the last book. Revelation 2:2, Revelation 6:10, Revelation 2:26 through 27, Revelation 12:5, Revelation 9:15. You read those passages and you see Jesus coming back as a just judge. And that's the end. To those who are not in Christ, understand that what Psalm 137 says will happen in a different way when Jesus comes back, and that's why we need to repent and believe the gospel. Now, let me offer 2 more books before we get out of here, and I am going to do the freestyle. Walking in the Ways of the Lord, The Ethical Authority of the Old Testament by Christopher J. H. Wright. Very interesting book about ethics in the Old Testament and how to apply that in a New Testament setting. He's a very helpful writer, I think. And he writes on this topic a lot. This might be the first edition. There might be a later edition, but that's one I encourage you if you want to look more in this. This doesn't talk about Psalm 137 specifically. It's about our larger issue. Now, if you want to get into the bigger issue of these types of things about killing innocents and that type of thing, there's a book by Paul Copan and Matthew Flanagan. Do I agree with everything in here? No. But is it a good book that's very helpful for thought? Yes. Now, it has some philosophy in it, so be prepared. But nonetheless, it's a good book. It's pretty heady. Did God really command genocide? Now, I bring this to you because guess what? Remember I told you one of the reasons I need to get to ETS, everybody, is because they've got great book sales. Well, this is one of the books that they had there, and I picked up last year. So I recommend those to you. Now, I'm going to close with a clip and then do my freestyle. What's the clip I'm going to close with? I've actually got a brief clip where Matt Slick, a Christian apologist a number of years ago, was briefly interacting with who? An atheist. And I want to break down this interaction, and this is how we're going to close out. Everybody pay attention to this.
What I would find as challenging parts in the Bible. And I gave you one. I gave you one. In Psalm, it talks about God basically celebrating, taking babies, smashing their heads against rocks.
So he's talking to an atheist here, Matt Slick, who you're going to see in a second. Sorry for the low quality. That's how the original video was. And he's saying, hey, I'm an outsider, and I have a problem with this. Now, listen how Matt Slick answers.
The verse I'm talking about? I'm familiar. Okay, so I mean, me as an outsider, I'd have it wrong? Yeah, that's right.
You probably couldn't hear it, but what Matt Slick said was, is that a problem? That is a presuppositional question. Why did Matt Slick just ask an atheist who specifically brought up Psalm 137:9? Why did he ask him, is that a problem? The atheist is saying, hey, as an outsider, I have a problem with your book and with your God and your whole structure because of this verse. It says you should, well, it doesn't say you should, but the way he's kind of, this says that, hey, talks about dashing the heads of babies against rocks. Now, what's up with that? Matt Slick says, is that a problem? Why does Matt Slick say, is that a problem? He's challenging the atheist at the very foundation of his worldview. Let me make myself a little bit bigger here since I'm talking about this. What do I mean by that? He's going to challenge him on his structure for morality because the atheist's objection assumes something, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? It assumes murder's wrong. That's how he's viewing it. It assumes it's wrong to kill innocents. That's how he's viewing it. It assumes certain ethical right and wrong. So he has a problem. But the question is, where did he get that from? If I'm a Christian, I could see how I got to deal with this challenging text because I can say, hey, I know murder's wrong. I know you're supposed to love your enemies. I know this. I know that. What's the atheist know? Where's his foundation for morality? His own opinion? If it's his own opinion, who cares what the atheist says? Why is he, some white guy living in a Western context judging ancient brown people in the Middle East? This sounds like cultural imperialism. See what I'm saying? Watch this.
I know. How do you know?
Is it a problem? I know. He's saying, yeah, it is a problem, and I know it's a problem. Matt says, how do you know? He's saying, how do you know that this is a problem verse? Matt Slick only asked a few questions, but these are great questions. Now watch.
Well, that's an absolutely crucial question. Last 12 verses. Yes, because you'd say it's wrong. And if we were discussing it, say we're neighbors, we're talking about it, say, okay, Bob.
So we're neighbors, we're talking about it. He's saying that's an absolutely crucial question. And the guy's kind of stuttering, you notice there. And he's saying, we're neighbors, we're talking about this. And I'm going to ask you, is it wrong?
Yes, I'm all right.
I thought your name was Cole. College.
Sorry.
I'd say, why is it wrong? Now, I'm not playing games.
He's saying that's a real legitimate question. I'm asking the atheist, why is it wrong? That's the best question ever. So when the atheist challenges you with any of these passages and they say, this is wrong in your Bible, say, can I ask you a question about that? Why do you think that's wrong? Now, usually they'll try to turn it back. Well, if you don't think it's wrong, something's wrong with you. No, I'm saying from your worldview, tell me why you think this passage is wrong. What do you have a problem with about it?
Why is it wrong?
Why is it wrong?
Well, just help me out here? I mean, do you...
Help me out here. Why can't the atheist? Why can't he answer? Well, here's why it's wrong. You notice he doesn't have a good answer for why this is even wrong. It's like by a few questions, his worldview that he's using to critique the Christian worldview, this moral foundation that he thinks he has, is it gone? Why does he need Matt Slick's help to simply answer why it's wrong to do this? Because he's the one who brought up as an objection, right?
It's wrong. Depends what the context is.
Well, yes.
Depends what the context is. And that's where this book comes into play. It talks about sort of basically circumstances under divine command theory, a modified divine command theory, in which we understand things in the past primarily, in unusual circumstances where something like this could not be wrong or could be right, in essence.
I think it's... I can't imagine the context would be...
I can't imagine.
Right, is point one. Point two is...
I can't imagine that it could be right is point one. What does that, his own incredulity, have to do with anything?
Have the Bible...
So it's wrong to destroy babies and just rip them.
So notice how quick... Now I'm going to play this, and I'm going to let it go, because here Matt Slick is going to kind of change the level of argumentation. I'm going to play this through so you can hear it one more time. I know the sound's a little tough, but listen up.
What I would find as challenging parts in the Bible. And I gave you one. I gave you one. In Psalm it talks about God basically celebrating, taking babies, smashing their heads against rocks. Do you know the verse I'm talking about?
I'm familiar.
Okay, so I mean, me as an outsider, I'd have
Is that wrong?
Yeah, that's wrong.
How do you know? I know. How do you know? Well, that's an absolutely crucial question.
Last 12 verses.
Yes, because you'd say it's wrong. And if we were discussing it, say we're neighbors, we're talking about it, say, okay, Bob.
Yes, I'm all right.
I thought your name was Cole. College.
Sorry.
I'd say, why is it wrong? Now, I'm not playing games. I'd say, why is it wrong?
Well, just help me out here. I mean, do you think it's wrong?
It depends what the context is.
Well, yes.
I think it's. I can't imagine the context would be right. Is point one. Point two is to have the Bible. I mean,
So it's wrong to destroy babies and just rip them apart and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're for abortion?
I'm pro-choice, right?
Oh, so you are for killing babies and tearing them apart?
No, I'm not.
Oh, so you're not for it?
I am pro-choice.
No, you're
and not
not.
killing babies.
Well, I'm pro-choice too. I believe women have the right to make choices. I don't think they should be having the right to kill babies. But so when they go in the womb and the baby's in there, they can rip their legs out and shred them and break their skulls. That's okay.
What I'm saying is I'm making the obvious distinction between a fetus and a baby.
Does a fetus have human nature?
Well, the challenge, I suppose, is where does the fetus turn into a baby?
Well, does life begin at conception?
Let me just work through this. There's a huge difference between a fertilized cell and you or a baby. An out-of-the-womb baby.
The difference is potentiality, naturally. But the nature is DNA, right? Human DNA, so by nature, by definition, it's human.
It's a human cell. Yes.
Okay. So it has human DNA and human nature.
Yes.
All right. And its design and purpose.
All these cells that I just carelessly, they could be cloned into other people, and I don't give a damn. I'm just scratching them off. I mean, call me barbaric, but there you go.
But their design is not that it's the result of fertilization of a sperm and an egg that come together.
These are human cells.
All right, let me stop there. So what the atheist is saying, well, I just scratched off some human cells from my skin. Is that the same thing as murder? Because what Matt Slick did is saying, oh, so you think it's wrong for babies to be killed, so you think abortion is wrong, which is, I had never heard this until I did research last night, what Matt Slick's doing here. But notice it's calling into question the consistency of the atheistic worldview. I did the same thing actually with Seth in a different context with Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist podcast. I encourage you to listen to the debate I had with him. Now, I'm not going to play the rest of this clip, but you get an idea there of the discussion. And notice, when the atheist brings this verse to us, we need to challenge their worldview, guys. We need to challenge their worldview to say, is that a problem? Why is it a problem? And then ask them about their own consistency with how they handle it and deal with it. And that's a thing to do. So today was not to impress the atheist, because when I talk about, oh, this imprecatory psalm, and this is from an insight from Michael Heiser, comes out of the Abrahamic covenant, which says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And the imprecatory psalms are simply saying, hey, remember those covenant promises to your people Israel. When I bring that up, the atheist is acting like, well, there is no God to make a covenant promise. So that's a nonsensical argument to them. So this is more for God's people to understand and get the proper context. Now, let me play a little more of this while I get the freestyle set up, everybody.
Human DNA with cloning, they could turn to other people. That is a potential humans in the hundreds. And I don't care.
I know, but I'm
a barbarian.
What I said was that when an egg and a sperm come together, what it is the formation of, I don't say a new life, because there isn't a new life. It's a continuation of life. The egg and the sperm are already alive. You don't have formation of life. You don't have new life because this is already alive. There's something happens. We don't know what it is. It comes in.
And I do encourage you guys to check out carm.org. And all the people who gave in the super chat, thank you very much, you guys. Hey, what's up, MJ Jackson? Hey, what's up, KW True? Good to see you guys. We are going to get to ETS, and I appreciate you guys giving because you're helping to make it happen, whether it's through Patreon, Cash App, PayPal, or whether it's through the GoFundMe setup. Again, thank you for all that. And I'll try to put these books in the top link there. I'm going to go live again Thursday, everybody, so pay attention to the channel. And I think what I'm going to probably do is actually read some articles from some ETS issues that I got. I'm probably going to go through some articles and read them so you can learn more about that as we try to get to ETS. Now I'm getting the freestyle set up. By the way, look for an upload tomorrow. Remember how I had Anthony Rogers on and he said, yeah, Vocab, remember when you debated me and you were the Muslim? Well, guess what? I've actually found the video footage of that. So tomorrow I'm going to upload video footage of me debating as a Muslim. Meaning it was a role-playing practice. I played the role of a Muslim attacking Scripture, and I debated Anthony Rogers on, is Jesus God? That upload's going up tomorrow. Very, very interesting, I think, right? So, let's get the freestyle ready, guys. Let me see what beat we're going to use here. Because you guys have given, and the way it works is, if you give enough in the super chat, or we have 100 viewers, which we got really close to, I will freestyle. Alright, I've never used this beat before. It's not one of my favorite ones, but I think I'm going to use it for the first time. Ooh, it's a little shorter, so I'll probably have to rewind it. I don't know if I want to use that one. Let me see. Try to fill it out. Yeah, let's just use it and just repeat it, okay? Here we go. Y'all ready? Freestyle to end the show. Thank you very much for joining Backpack Radio Live. Let's end on a freestyle because you guys made it happen today in the super chat. All right. Yeah. 3, 2. Yeah. Vocab, that's my name. If you're in the chat, I'm glad you came. We spoke about a verse that causes lots of pain. When the blood would drain from the innocent victim, it seems. So we go into the written text. I speak the truth from my larynx. It ain't designed to flex. Yes, we read the Bible in context as a Christ disciple. We see it's very liable to be misinterpreted. That's the word. That ain't good. And I'm scared to do that. So I try to bring the truth when I speak it, the truth when I read it, the truth when I see it, the truth when I bring it. So I gotta do a lot of study. I'm glad you joined. Thanks to the buddies in the super chat. You helped me going. You gave me time to pull a book from the backpack and read it. Here's an example of that. Did God really command genocide? That's a good book, and I will prescribe this book as well by right. It's kinda dope. I grabbed the mic. There's a couple others. What's up, sisters and brothers? Julian West and David Doss. I see you and everybody in the chat making it happen. Vocab Malone, and now I'm freestyling, rapping. What's up, GMS? Thank you for coming, even though your exegesis, I mean your eisegesis is a total mess. It's all good, I still got love for ya. I know you're gonna make an upload to try to be a lethal weapon like Danny Glover against my exegesis, but it won't work because you have the wrong Jesus. You got a fake one. Your whole religion is nothing but fake, son, because you're a fake one, but you need to get with the real one. He's God's son. He's God the Son. You need to come him. He'll make you repent for all your lyrical heart, spiritual red rum. That means murder, and that's word up. Okay, you're living in the flesh, so you need to get served up. Repent and do it now. That's metanoia. That's the Greek vow. I meant the Greek word. All right, guys, we're gonna do one more beat because we're having a little bit of fun, right? Let's do this last beat right here, and then we're just gonna jump out. You guys are awesome. This is pretty dope today. What's up, Leader for Christ? What's up, y'all? What's up, MJ Jackson? Thanks for the super chat. Oh yeah, drink some water. You're right. Oh yeah. Today was very beneficial. Today was like a Scud missile into the enemy's camp. I see the Christians in the chat getting all amped. I see the Christians down with the word, and I see GMS running. They do not like what they heard. They're scared, they're perturbed. Where's the atheist at? I don't know. I did not observe any in the live stream today, but I hope they come back tomorrow, Wednesday. I hope that they listen to what we say, and I pray that they would not go astray like sheep we all do. Atheists, please, the gospel is true. Believe it, please. Begin to repent. His spirit, open your eyes, and the Bible makes sense. He won't relent if you are elect. So I grab the mic and say one check, and then I open the scripture tonight. I paint a picture. I hope I did it right. I'm an artiste, but he's the artist, and I don't claim to be not the smartest. I'm not Ron Artest. I won't choke you out. Not doing that. I will not go that route like the Trill Spreewell with his favorite coach. I say that tongue in cheek. You know God is dope. Dope in a good sense, like dope in a dumb sense. And now I come. I am 6 pence, none the richer. Water's my Alexa. I don't do the liquor. I try not to be bitter, but I might pray in Imprecatory. If I pray that psalm, you know I give God the glory. That's my story. It's not vindictive. I say to the atheists, hey yo, just let me live. You can have your worldview, we'll test it for consistency. And you can come to me, but you better remember the laws of logic don't flow from material causes. Hey yo, atheists, you got a lot of flaws in your worldview. And I see that in your clauses, your whole sentence structure. The Bible will rupture the false worldview. So I'm coming to, yes y'all, to a mic near you, or maybe a screen. This is the end of the stream. Give a shout out, go ahead my team, and scream. Alright, look for that upload tomorrow. It's been another episode. Shout out to my backpackers. See you back, backpackers, tomorrow. Not on the live stream, but on the upload. You're gonna love it. Y'all have been great. It's been a great session. See you Thursday for another live stream.